Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Lau Times podcast. Got a special guest all the way from Chicago, Chi-Town, Jorge Moreno. How are you, my friend?
Good, man. Good. Excited. Getting ready for tomorrow. Getting the juices going, and just like excited to be here. So thank you for the invitation, and I'm ready to go.
Absolutely, bro. I can see a few things in the back, and I'm excited to ask you a few things about them. I see a jersey. I see a couple of seats from the stadium there. Let's just start there, bro. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And, obviously you're in Chicago, or have you been in Chicago all your life?
Yeah. So actually, my crazy. It's a very crazy story. But yes, I'm born and raised in the city of Chicago. My mother's Mexican. She's from Mexico City, and my dad's Ecuadorian. He's from La Ciudad de Quito. So again, raised my whole 33 years in the city of Chicago, but probably one of the biggest Tigres fans in this whole city in the Midwest, I could probably say.
That's awesome. So Mexico City, dad, and then mom from Ecuador, or did I get that backwards?
Vice versa. My mom's Mexico
Vice
City,
versa.
and dad's Ecuador. Yeah.
Okay, so how does Tigres come into the picture here?
Like in most cases, I had an uncle. I have an uncle actually. I have an uncle, my uncle Danny. He's from Monterrey. So my aunt and uncle, they have all my cousins, and most of them are all my age, boys. And whenever we'd go over to my aunt's house, my uncle would be watching the game, and from then on, he was the one that actually took me to the stadium for my first time, bought me my jersey, my flag, and that's the story, man. From there, I was 10 years old at that time, so ever since then, it's been the wild ride of being a Tigres fan.
That's awesome, bro. I love the the Ecuadorian aspect. Who do you recall when you first started watching Tigres, or any player besides lately Ener Valencia that you can think of from Ecuador?
Yeah, Ivan Hurtado, on the defensive side, that's like first connection with Tigres and Ecuador, and it's pretty wild because I want to say around 2015. I actually made it out to Ecuador, and my cousin worked as security at the time, so he got me on-field pass. And Ivan Hurtado, that was his last year playing, so he's coming off the pitch, and I see him, and I say, Hurtado, Tigres, and he didn't really acknowledge it. And right behind him was Luis Saritama, and he came over and he acknowledged me being a Tigres fan. So that's another Ecuadorian that I really associate with Tigres.
Dude, Luis Fernando Saritama came with a big cartel promise of being a really good player. It just didn't pan out. He was a promising star for Ecuador at the time when he first came over, but Ivan Hurtado, man, I've said it, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. I tweeted out, Ivan Hurtado was one of the, a top center back that, we weren't as prominent back then when he was around, but he was part of really good teams early on in the 2000s for Tigres. And, he had a cannon of a shot out of the back. And so he did score some golazos. But that's great, man. So let's get a little bit more back to your personal side, and we'll get a little bit more into Tigres. Chicago, what do you do there, for a career? I know that you work for TUDN, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yes. So I work for TUDN and associated with Latino Media Network. And I actually am a Spanish analyst for the Chicago Cubs and the Chicago Blackhawks. So wild ride again. Everything connects to Tigres in one way or another. But I put that passion that I have for my soccer team into my local teams, and it's gotten me where I am today. So yeah. So if you're ever listening to a Cubs game, you tune in into the MLB app. You click on the Chicago Cubs Spanish. You could hear my voice there, and same thing with the Blackhawks if there's ever a hockey game.
So you do the play-by-play.
I do the color analyst. My colleague, my friend Miguel Esparza, he does the play-by-play. He's just amazing. So,
dude, tell me a little bit about that. How has that journey been for you?
It's been wild. It's been crazy. I started off as an audio engineer. I started on the background side, and my intention was never really to be on the air, to be on the mic. But so I learned that side of the business of the work first. So connecting the equipment, making sure the audio is good when you hear it either on the air, on TV, on radio. And then from then on, somebody or one of the broadcasters didn't show up one day, and my boss calls me and she's like, "You have really good Spanish, and I need someone to go on the air. So I need you to go on the air." And I didn't say no. I said yes. I was nervous. I was shaking. And I went on the air that day, and ever since then, that path to the career opened up for me, and I've taken full advantage of it. And I'm blessed to be able to say that that's my job nowadays.
That's amazing. And how long has that been for you now?
I started in 2016, so it's been a good amount of years now. 2016 as an engineer, and then I'd say around 2018 was the first year I started on air.
That's great, bro. And what do you think has been like the most? I know obviously when you first get thrown into an opportunity like that, there's no answer besides a yes, because that's an opportunity of a lifetime. And now obviously you're probably a lot more seasoned into the position. What has been the most challenging aspect, and what has been the most fun aspect, to do your job?
Yeah. I think the most challenging was saying or calling sports in Spanish. I think because growing up in the city, growing up in the States, specifically in Chicago, well, everything was always in English. To watch baseball, it'd be in English. I'd watch basketball, it'd be in English. Football, and then I'd go to school, and all my friends would talk about these sports in English. So I think that was a little bit of the most hardest part, I'd say. But it was just the dedication to be able to want to learn it, to know that that this is the path that I know I should be on because of how much I love all of this. And then and I think it's important for everybody to practice that Spanish. I think that's something that I'm also very vocal about, to really love that part of our story, of our culture, and really something that our parents and our grandparents taught to us. So I'm proud to be able to say that Spanish part is very key.
That's awesome, bro. I mean, I can't imagine like growing up, whatever sports, fan base you're part of in any city, and then having to grow up as a kid and like looking up to a lot of these people and players, and then eventually get into a position where you're in the media for your hometown, and then, being able to call these games. So shout out to you, my friend. I'm sure that's a heck of a journey you've been on, and I'm sure it's very well deserved. So congrats on that.
Appreciate it.
Cubs, Chicago's, obviously Wrigley Field, a historic place. How is that, walking into that baseball stadium every single time that you're going to call the game?
It's magical, it really is. And again, my broadcast partner, he's also born in the city of Chicago. His father is Mexican and his mother is Puerto Rican. And he grew up being a Cubs fan too. So, we always walk in there and we're like, man, it's such a blessing. It's a dream come true. And just to say, so much history, like you said, and then it's something really, really cool. And it's just something that, as you said, something that you just keep working on, and you see the people, you see the Hispanic people at Wrigley Field. A couple of nights ago was a Puerto Rican Heritage Night, and just seeing all the Boricuas there was really cool, man. It's really be able to connect to your hometown and just overall your roots.
How does the fan division there, because obviously a similar thing like Monterrey and Nuevo León, where you have Rayados and Tigres, you have the White Sox and the Cubbies. How does that work for the kid growing up? Is that sort of the same path inherited, or is it where you're at in terms of the city to cheer on either team?
Yeah. I mean, the Cubs are like the bougie team of the city. Every tourist that comes to Chicago goes to Wrigley Field. And then they're on the north side of the city, which is the wealthier side of the city. And the White Sox are on the south side of the city, the blue collar part of the city. And it's crazy you mentioned that, because that's also, it's also been something I've been connected to my whole life, rivalries. And that's something that it's really tied to being a fan of overall, and specifically in this case, Tigres and the Cubs. And I grew up in the southwest part of the city. I grew up in Cicero. And that's essentially very White Sox heavy. A lot of the Mexican culture in the city of Chicago is very White Sox heavy. But me and my friends, those friends around the neighborhood, we were all Cubs fans. So we hop on the train and just head on over to the stadium. Even if we didn't get into the stadium, it'd be just we had the thrill of going to the stadium and just being around the stadium.
That's great, bro. I'm gonna move on to something neither sports related, because it's something that, I've been to California a lot, and I myself have a catering business, and, specifically Mexican food. We do a lot of tacos, and in Monterrey, how the tacos are. California obviously has its own touch of Mexican food, but Chicago, my parents have gone, and, I've had a lot of friends that tell me about Chicago Mexican food. Have you had any Mexican food in Texas, California? And then how would you compare that and talk about to hype up Chicago Mexican food.
I love overall food and specifically tacos. And so I've been to those two cities. I've seen Tigres in those two cities, and I'd say the California taco, you have to expect the West Coast style taco. You have to expect that guacamole, and it's just a different style of taco. And Houston, I can relate it as to closest to Monterrey. You see, you go get a taco al pastor, taco de trompo, and it's like you're in Monterrey. So that I love that part. Like I love that connection with Houston and the tacos. And here in Chicago, I'd say we're more of Mexico City, Michoacan style taco. So it's a little different, but nonetheless, you find all kinds of delicious food here in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, no, it's definitely on my bucket list, man. I told you when we were connecting via message, Wrigley Field's on my bucket list. I really want to go, but being somewhat of a taco man myself, I really want to explore all the tacos options and just the different styles that get brought up.
Now, if I ask you, what's your favorite style of taco?
Oh, Regio, bro, de Monterrey. Yeah. So we do our catering business, and we do everything on the grill. Todos asado, carne asada. We do the trompo. We even do chicken. And most people that do chickens, a lot of people the complaint is like when they first hear about it is like, oh, like it's gonna be dried up. It's not gonna be flavorful. But when you provide a good marinade, and you obviously layer marinade over. I usually do a day. And then we throw everything on the grill because I relate it back to my roots, todo like carnita asada, carbon, and all that stuff. So it gives it a different flavor. It has the flavor of the marinades that we provide on it, and then as well as that smoky aspect from the charcoals and that char. So for me, it doesn't get any better than that. I went to California and in LA, and I tried so many different places from East LA to downtown LA. And the one thing for me, that was across the board, their salsas weren't good. Obviously, I haven't been to Chicago. My mom loved it, though, and she went to LA recently, and she was like, there's no comparison. Chicago Mexican food is way better. And, but here, like you said, there's a lot of obviously because we're close to the border and, specifically the northern states like Nuevo León, the tacos are pretty, on par with how they are over there. And funny enough, I was, we were talking about a couple of days with somebody that I met at the game, and I was telling them the different type of places or the different restaurants that I recommend or taquerias around town, and all of them are Regio oriented. So ultimately, that's where I'm at with it.
Tacos mañaneros, a big fan of tacos
mañaneros? Oh yeah, bro, tortilla de harina always con un guisadito. Yeah, it's my favorite, man. We when we go to Monterrey, my aunts live near us. There's a mercadito, so we go have breakfast there. Nice. every when they set up every Friday. So yeah, big fan of that.
Nice.
But yeah, ultimately, taco regios all the way.
Oh, that's it, man. That's it. It's funny because I grew up. Obviously, like I said, I grew up in Chicago. But at the age of say 11 to 18, every summer, every 3 months that I had from some summer vacation would be first day off, second day off, all the way to one day before I had to start school. I'd be in Monterrey all summer. So I like to say that I grew up in Monterrey. Monterrey saw me grow up. So yeah, you mentioned all that food, and I used to cry before I would hop on the plane because I would miss tacos de trompo, I'd miss Tigres, I'd miss just that cultura regia that really I call home.
Yeah, I would even go up, bro, that now when the times that I go to Mexico, outside of Monterrey, like Cancun, I take a flight from here to Monterrey to arrive and have my tacos de trompo, and then the next day fly out, just because it works flexibility wise with pricing, because the flight in Mexico is cheaper.
Yeah.
And the flight from Houston to Monterrey is there's always a direct flight. It's pretty accessible in terms of price. And then on top of that, I get to have my tacos de trompo or an hamburguesa from the street. So
you can't beat it,
Absolutely. So great insight there on the food, man. I appreciate that.
For sure.
Let's move on a little bit to growing up. Where did you go to school, and then how did you get inspired? Obviously, you learned about the production aspect of doing radio. Is that something that you always wanted to do when you went to school, and then eventually turn into quite possibly a dream job working for your fan base?
Not necessarily. I mean, I guess what really led me on to this career overall to what media is was I was just explaining how I grew up going to Mexico. At 2:00 I would go and watch Football al Día with Roberto Hernandez Jr.
Oof.
And that's something like I couldn't miss that. Once that Tigres bug was in me, once I was a big fan of this team, just in general, because either one Saturday Tigres is playing or Monterrey is playing, and when one is playing at home, that whole week turns about that team, and deja tu un clásico, ¿no? Entonces, just seeing him from 2 to 3 every day that summer, I would love the passion that he would bring. And just going to all these games, going to basketball games, kind of Bulls playoff games, Cubs playoffs games, and just be growing in that atmosphere. It's just put me into what it is today, and that is now a career. It's just, I would say, destiny, and being at the right place at the right time. I think is really what's motivating me and what's gotten me to where I am today.
Bro, I cannot believe you threw out a Fútbol al Día shout out. I don't think anybody that I've interviewed since I started this podcast, besides when we talk about it, amongst ourselves when we do the pod, Lou, who's a little bit on the older side, who runs Tigres English, and Alfred, grew up watching Fútbol al Día. I'm not sure about Dennis and Edgar, but Fútbol al Día, man, that was like the time. Don Robert was the pregame to the pregame before you got to the stadium. From 2 to 3, that's how you got going before you got to the stadium, and then eventually heading inside El Volcán. So big representation of what Tigres was, and will become because of what he started with the passion that he instilled and the rivalry that he pushed amongst the fans between Tigres and Rayados. So, like I said, no one had mentioned it, and it's a big part of our life.
It was that, and it was Pasión Futbolera as well. That was a rivalry. Two different channels. You flip from one to the other. One was talking about Rayados. You flip to the one that was talking about Tigres, and it was that was. I think you summed it up very perfectly. It was a pregame to the pregame, and that would get you hyped for the week, and then let alone Saturday, bro.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into it. When did you start? I know you mentioned your uncle introduced you to the team. When does that happen? Around what period of Tigres era does that come in play?
Earlier you mentioned about the rest of the guys on your podcast. I want to give those guys a big shout out, and just overall, you guys are doing a great job. I think it's been great.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. And on the just where it started really beginning was, I'd say the first final against Pachuca, 2001. I think that was the summer I came back, and I remember that loss, and that loss was pretty bad, that Saturday. And then the second one in 2003, I was fan enough that I actually made it out to that final. That was my first final. And I was in communication with my cousin that whole week, and he actually had stayed overnight at the stadium since Wednesday night to get tickets. And I got there that Saturday, and losing that final was just like that 03 team was like, damn, because they were really good. They were the best team in the league that year. Yeah. And then for them to lose in the Volcán contra Pachuca again, after the Cookie Silvani goal. Yeah, that's where my path really starts in 03.
Wow. So 03, we're talking about, that's Neri Pumpido. Yeah. That's the team we always said that should have won a championship. So that's obviously head coach is Neri Pumpido, Walter Gaitán, probably the best player with Cookie Silvera, Ireneo Suarez, Campagnolo is the goalkeeper. I can't remember too much of the back line right now, but
you got
Briseño, Sancho was on the squad. God, who was the right back too? Saavedra was on there. Saavedra's like the unluckiest player to play in Liga MX. So many finals appearances and never won one.
El Bacalao.
Bacalao. So 03, obviously. So my next question probably leads into like an easy answer. Who was your first idol watching of Tigres when you started watching Tigres?
I'd say Ireneo Suarez, even though I do remember a little bit more of the older team, like we said, Ivan Hurtado and them. But to me, Ireneo Suarez and those goals that were so iconic of his, that shot that he had, I think that would be my first one. And then obviously Walter Gaitán becomes, all these idols that we've had, Cookie Silvera. It would be really, really cool. And at that time, I would have to come back to Chicago, becoming this big Tigres fan, and I come across all these people that are Chivas, America, some Pumas, Cruz Azul, and that's basically it, And I'm the only Tigres fan in this city. I'm the only Tigres fan growing up, really rooting for this team, and it's been crazy, but I think it's been an amazing journey of how much this team has grown from that to what it is now.
Yeah, no kidding. And I mean, Ireneo Suarez, I want to touch up a little bit on that. Ireneo Suarez is a player that gets missed, obviously, in a lot of our history amongst the newer generation of fans, especially when we started being a lot more successful. Because, nobody, anybody that's been a fan for a long time obviously watched, the bad times when we first got Lucas Lobos and, everything that he endured. But obviously Walter was around before that, and some people obviously remember him because everything that he accomplished, as far as like stats wise, right? The Clásico Regios,
For
the
sure.
goals that he scored, the scoring titles, being the best player in the league. Ireneo Suarez is a player that gets missed because it was during a time where Tigres was barely starting to spend more money on players in the early 2000s, and just like you said, a world class player. So. Where do you think he falls? I know recently we did a pod of, in terms of like we did our own version of a Mount Rushmore, El Cerro de la Silla. So we put him at the very bottom of like a 5 tier or 6 tier. I can't remember what it was. Do you think that that's a good fit for him to be, among the legends of the club, where somebody that's, who he was and deserves that accolade of being remembered, but maybe didn't get a championship?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think so for sure. I think for sure that where you guys put him in that Mount Rushmore, I think that's perfect enough. Us that we do remember him, we were lucky enough to recall those goals and what his goals meant to that team and that time. But I think thankfully we've had other players that have come through the team and have delivered us championships and delivered us all these other accolades. But nonetheless, without no Daniel Suarez, we wouldn't be where we're at today in a lot of sense, if I could put it that way.
Absolutely. You mentioned in Chicago, Chivas, Cruz Azul, los cuatro grandes,
Yeah.
and all
Siempre.
everything that it represents, right? How, and you talk about the growth that Tigres has had, and the journey that the team has been. How, talk to me and walk me through that emotional aspect of, you mentioned when you first started watching the two championships that you lost, especially being in the States, right? And we see sports in a different light, and the mystique aspect, the magical aspect that Liga MX and the fan base that we get close to. Walk me through the, like I said, the aspect of Tigres growing where we're at now in the journey, and relating it to the Chicago area and what it's been like for Tigres now versus then whenever you were growing up.
It was always interesting. I'd say growing up being one of the very few Tigres fans, especially at that young age, because I remember I would want to bet with people, because I'd be like, oh, these hombres que gana Tigres, and it would be always the older people that were all these fans. So, but just I think the growth of this team in general, you start seeing it within soccer teams locally. You start seeing it by them playing certain games on primetime television. I think that has a huge impact, and the connection with the youth and overall with these new players or these players that have their world class or world known. I think that's helped out the growth of the team in general. Here in the city of Chicago, nothing. I don't think anything else but winning will always, will make its way to where it needs to. In this case, it's the city where people nowadays do respect this team. Nowadays, you do see this logo a lot more often than ever before. And I think overall, it's been great for the team and been great overall for Liga MX and the city of Chicago. Cada vez más se ve el logotipo de Tigres, and it's if I could connect it real quick back to home, I was just in Ecuador like a couple of weeks ago, and I remember walking out of the sports store and I saw a Tigres jersey, and on my way to see my grandfather's grave in Quito, I saw another Tigres logo, and it's funny because I was able to take my Ecuadorian grandpa to El Volcan with my father. So there's a lot of connection there. And so it's just overall the growth, not just in the city of Chicago, but I can say worldwide that I've seen through my eyes with this team at Tigres.
And that's probably the thing that like brings me a lot of joy, doing this pod and just going through the journey, right? You mentioned everything that we've gone through in terms of the championships and like almost descenso and then all the success. To see your team just on a scale of like being talked about earlier today, I was listening to Taylor Twelman talk on his podcast about Tigres and just like listening to what they're saying and just remembering that kid in me of like barely catching any games as a young, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old growing up in the States because they weren't on TV. Not necessarily due to the fact that they didn't want Tigres, but just Liga MX wasn't around in general. Like you would catch a Saturday game and one Sunday game, and that was it, with a lot of reruns late in the early mornings around 1, 2 in the morning. So just seeing that, it just brings a lot of joy to me, and realizing that now, getting you on the pod, and, recently Mark in St. Louis, and just the different people that I've interviewed throughout the country about the team itself. It's a really cool feeling to acknowledge where the team has become and where it's gotten to.
It's crazy you mentioned that the reruns. You're right. Either we'd be on Galavisión,
Yeah.
or we'd be later on at night at plus 12 o'clock at midnight or something, and it would be wild, because you would have to make your way to find the people to watch the game.
Right.
But I think that's part of the adrenaline rush as well, that you couldn't miss that game. Saturday 5 o'clock when the Tigres jugaban a las 5, you couldn't miss it. And then obviously now at 7, but I would where I would live, I would have a corner store, so I'd make sure I run, go get some botanas, come back, and just try to mimic the passion I would live in an estadio back at home. If that makes sense,
dude. And then talk about, like, we didn't have obviously the technology like we have now, so you couldn't really keep up with, like, the score, so you would have to wait to, like, figure out, like, what the result was going to be, and, like, you couldn't expect a terrible loss even though the game happened way earlier, or a great win. So that was pretty cool growing up with that, and then to also reflect and compare to where the team is at now. So ultimately, I think that the team has done tremendous amount of job to get there.
I know you mentioned all you guys talked about in one of the last pods about the atmosphere that was just in Houston. I think that's amazing. I think if I'm glad that they found their home base here in the States, and I think that's where you start. And then from there, you just keep growing. And I believe that that's what this team is on the path to do. And I think that's what they're going to do.
Yeah. And, they got a little hub in California, LA area. Not as big, obviously, but, it's going to be LA here. I hope that it makes it to Chicago. And, earlier before we started recording, I asked you about the jersey in the back. So share with me about the story, because I want to get into the Chicago times that you've gone to see them there.
Yeah, so this jersey was from La Interliga. It's actually the time they won the Interliga, right there. Yeah. It was that summer. That summer, they came, and I remember that I found out where their practice was through a friend that was also a big Tigres fan. And I remember I made it out there, and I was waiting, and the bus wouldn't show up, and I was getting nervous. And then the bus finally showed up. I'm like, damn, there comes the team. There comes Tigres. And Lucas Lobos is the first one to get out of the bus, and I was starstruck. I couldn't say anything. I was like, Luca, and I gave him the jersey. Thankfully, he signed it. A bunch of other Tigres in that era signed it. Fernando Ortiz, Pepe Rivas, with other players. And I remember I went in the corner and I talked to Rivas, and I told him that I was there for his debut game. It was un amistoso pretemporada contra Santos. I remember my uncle took us to that game, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And it was cool. We connected after that. That day, we bring back Cubs versus Sox in the rivalry. I had tickets to that Cubs Sox game with one of my friends. Go to the game. On the way out, it was at the White Sox. On the way out, my friend's like, "Hey, isn't that the Tigres players?" Because they were all wearing their gear. And sure enough, it was Fernando Ortiz, it was Pepe Rivas, it was Molina, it was Acuña, it was Kikín Fonseca, Carlos Turrubiates. And they're like, "We're trying to get back to our hotel, but we don't know how." I'm like, "I could take all of you guys on the train if you guys want to come with me." And they said, sure enough, they said, yes, here I am taking the 6 players from Tigres back to their hotel in the city of Chicago after a Cubs Sox game. And I started talking to Rivas, and I'm like, "Hey, I was earlier at the practice." He's like, "Oh yeah, I remember you." And sure enough, my friend at the time worked at a Target, and he would get discounts. So he hung out with Kikín Fonseca, and he told Kikín about his discount. So the next day, we're picking up Kikín Fonseca and Jose Rivas to take them to Target to buy some stuff for them and themselves and their family. And that was before the game. Against the fire, un golazo de Itamar.
Itamar, bro.
Within that game. And so that summer, I go to Monterrey, and I call Pepe Rivas, and he's like, "Yeah, I remember," because he told me, he's like, "Call me when you go to Monterrey." So sure enough, I call him. He takes me to a practice. I was at a practice. I was there, And to my left, sitting down, was Lucas Ayala, and to my right was Lagata Fernandez, and they were talking about Argentinian soccer. And I was like, "Dang, this is a wild ride. This is crazy, man." So to finish off the story, I was able to go and take the picture, the official picture with the team that day, and that was that connection. Sadly enough, though, I wasn't in the city of Chicago for the final between Fire and Tigres. That game lo vi en Monterrey.
Bro, I'm so starstruck on the fact that you were able to do like you were able to connect and put so much together in what represents your life in just a span of a moment. The train ride, transportation, Chicago, like that clicks in my head. Tigres, the White Sox game, like bringing it all together, and then obviously elevated to taking them showing you to a practice, you taking them to Target, like that's incredible, bro. That's such a great story, and I'm glad you were able to share that on the pod. So dang, that's pretty cool. Gata Fernandez y Tamar, man, that team had more potential because Lagata wasn't a bad player, but he just didn't click well with the squad. And then he was tinier, he wasn't big physically, had a lot of skill, but he wasn't a first, he wasn't a regular starter at the time, and obviously having the past of playing at Rayados, but he did score some good goals for Tigres. Itamar, what a beast. If he didn't, party so much, he could have done so much in Liga MX. Great technique for such a big body on a player.
Yeah. De hecho, en esa misma Interliga, that goal he scores against Santos was a very cool goal.
Yeah.
Jugada individual, and then he just scores it over the goalie. But that was unfortunately that was a team that estaba peleando el descenso, so that's why that team never got that love, because Daniel Guzman was the head coach. So it was just it was that rough era of the team, but nonetheless they had really good individual players.
And Pepe Rivas talks about that in the docuseries, how they were just so mentally drained trying to figure out how to like get out of the zona de descenso and like not be relegated, and that took a toll on them because they couldn't pull off wins, or like if they had a good game something would happen, and it was all really mental for them. I remember he mentions that and alludes to that in the docuseries.
That Saturday versus Morelia was a wild day, man. That was a very stressful Saturday, but then thankfully that ese cabezazo de Molina was a goal, was one of the goals that I screamed the most, that I really cheered for. But overall it was just that rough patch for that team, especially that partido contra Morelia.
Has there been any other times that they've come besides the Interliga to play in Chicago?
No. Closest I want to say was Columbus. It's not that long ago in the Conca Champions.
But they do have like a Libres y Locos chapter there, no? Like I feel like I've seen the Manta of Chicago.
That is very true. We have a big amount of fans. I'd say easily somewhere north of, I'd say 200 fans que son de Tigres. I could probably from Chicago, por si la Libres y Locos Chicago. El amigo Freddy, he's one of the ones that travels a lot. Chuy, he travels a lot as well. I try to make it out as many games as possible. But yeah, there's a good amount of us Tigres fans out here in the city of Chicago.
I know now, obviously, because you have professional work, and a Cubs season is a long time for MLB, and then obviously you get into hockey season. What is like a traditional, I guess, getting ready for a Tigres game look like for you?
Nowadays, it sucks in a lot of sense when there's a lot of Saturday games where I really can't watch the game because I'm at work myself. But I do try to come home and rewatch the game. But when there's no work, it's just, I'd say games at 7:00. You start getting ready. You start listening to certain songs, certain cumbia villeras throughout the day, and just try to by 5-6 o'clock mentally be ready. And game time comes, and it's just that focus of Tigres.
Is there a gap where you're able to like not be working because of your seasons and then enjoy Tigres, or is it just always intertwined?
It always intertwines nowadays. Unfortunately, but fortunately, because I am working.
Right.
But yeah, nowadays it's a lot more crazy. So I do try to find days when they're either nearby or a big game. Most of these finales, I try to just literally day of go to the game, come back day after.
That's wild, bro. But hey, that's what your profession requires. It's a lot of professionalism and being there for what you do.
For sure.
That's awesome, man. So you watch. We started talking about where you started watching Tigres, and then Irenio Suarez, Walter Gaetan, obviously a big topic for me because my first idols were Siboldi, Diablo Nunez, and then it leads into big fan of Irenio because he was a lefty, I'm a lefty. And then
Nice.
obviously comes Walter Gaitan, and then the guy that you just mentioned for the jersey and how your story begins in Chicago with the Interliga, Lucas Lobos. Talk to me about where you have these two guys in comparison, and then moments that you probably enjoyed more so out of Lucas Lobos because we touched up on Gaitan already, and what they mean for the club.
Yeah, I think they're 1A, 1B, man. I don't think you really can. Obviously the 1A is Luca Lopez because he gave you that championship, but Walter Gaetan is that 1B. And I think that was also my main era of being like a big Tigres fan throughout like 15, 16. So that was when I would, just everything would be surrounded by Tigres, like Saturdays, those days. No matter where I was in the world, I'd always try to make sure that I would either listen to it or try to watch it. And so I'd say that literally 1A, 1B with Luca Lobos, pero sí, en general, es los goles de Luca Lobos, la magia que trajo Luca Lobos in such a bad moment, in such a bad time within the organization. I think that's what also, makes you hold that special care for him. And you didn't see it. You didn't think that scrawny dude could do so much damage, but it was a piece of art that Lucas Lobos will play.
Yeah, man, Lucas Lobos, what a player. Okay, so now I want to get a little bit more into, we talked about the brand and we talked about the atmosphere at Houston and what it means for the brand itself or making that a hub. Let's talk about the stadium of El Volcán. You've also obviously visited it and, been to it many times. What's your perspective about, the current stadium versus the possible new stadium in Monterrey?
It's a very interesting subject, especially with nowadays with a lot of new stadiums. And at one point, most recently, I was thinking we need a new stadium. I was thinking we really need a new stadium. You see the state that it's in, and it's not in good shape. But then I think about it, and we need to preserve it. We need to find a way to preserve it. And this being because it's just so magical. You don't want to lose that. That's the last thing you want to lose is that magical place. And growing up going into El Volcán, yo soy de la 5B. General 5B was where my uncle had season tickets, and that's no matter what part, no matter what day, that's the section that I want to go to. So I give a big shout out to la 5B in El Volcán. But yeah, man. So I think it needs an uplift for sure, and a good amount of renovation, which should be done to it.
Yeah, it's so magical. You brought back some pieces behind you. I can see the two seats from El Volcán.
That is true. So the crazy part is of these two seats was one. I'd say it was probably around 2015. I was in Monterrey there with my aunt and uncle. At this point, my aunt and uncle had come back to Chicago, so I had no connection back to Monterrey anymore. The family that I had was back in Chicago. That summer, we all went to Monterrey, and on Facebook, I saw that they were renovating certain seats, and they're going to be selling older seats. So I told my uncle. My uncle's like, "Let's go." Took me to the stadium, and luckily enough, I was able to bring these two seats with me. And I'm working on making it a bench so that every Saturday or any Tigres game, I can just put up and just sit down and just live it as how it was supposed to be.
That's great. I like that a lot. So going off the brand and staying on with the stadium and we talking about preserving it and whatnot, I want to ask you. Being in the media world and, we've talked about the brand and where it's come to, with the growth that they've had. What do you think is the next step for Tigres to grow as a team?
It's a very interesting question. I've considered this, and I think more brand awareness, and I think they're doing it now. But I don't. I mean, they have enough winning. They've been winning as of late. So they just have to break into that barrier, break into that younger generation. I guess be more on like on the social media side, and just I think this VIX documentary is helping it a lot, or helped it a lot to really show the history of it, not to us the fans, which we appreciate it, but to the newer fans as well, and see how long the team has come in. And I think so. I think that overall, it's been helping the team, and I'm sure it'll keep growing.
What about like the English, right? We're doing this podcast in English, and we grew up watching the team in Spanish. How much growth do you think that they have to go there? And then what has been your like reflection of now seeing content for Tigres, not only through their social media pages, obviously that they've opened, but just our podcast and just general people talking more about Tigres in English, whether it's on the street or when you attend games.
I think it's positive, and I think it's growing at a very rapid rate, and I think it's been amazing. It's been amazing to see not only the seed planted, but it growing already automatically, and I think that's something very good for overall for this team, and what it could what it could show to other newer fans. This passion that how much we carry for this team, how much this team means a lot to us in a sports meaning, and also in a life meaning. Because that's something that we've connected our life to, and it's brought us this joy. And I think that's so. I think that's it's growing, and it's growing at a very fast pace. And this thanks to the overall great product also that we have on the field.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it's pure joy just hearing them like being more, because it's just exposure and like just brings you back great memories and what we started watching. I want to get a little bit more now into your things in relation to the team, as far as like favorite things, right? What do you think is your favorite jersey that the team has put out, or that you've liked the most personally?
Yeah, there's the one thing that I always loved is collecting jerseys, buying the jersey, and that's I think that's a Regio thing. I think that's a thing that's a part of our culture. Is once the jersey comes out, the first thing we're trying to do is buy that jersey. But I think the most iconic jersey, or my favorite jersey, has to be the Mundial de Clubes. That was the one jersey we always wanted. And to finally see it there, I think it had to be. Earlier we were talking about Mount Rushmore. I think that has to be number one in the Mount Rushmore jerseys.
Yeah, I screwed up with that one. I bought the jersey too soon. The one that they put out for the regular season.
Yeah.
And because like you said, Regio culture, you want to get your hands on it, so bought it. And then we went to Mundial de Clubes, and then it came out in a more simpler version, a clean version with this U or this view, and I was like, man, like I totally screwed up. So I ended up just getting the away, CONCACAF World Cup club jersey, and so that's a good one. What about let's go here. I think goalkeeper. I mean, I could ask a question, but I feel like best goalkeeper. I think it's pretty unanimous of who it might be. What about best defender of Tigres that you've seen or your favorite?
Best defender, I have to say Juninho. Juninho was always my favorite. From him coming into this team, and him just automatically showing that presence. That 3 on the jersey always looked very nice, and just the Juninho on the back. So I'd say Juninho's for sure up there, and obviously I have to give a big shout out to Pepe Rivas. And what he meant to this team and those goles and los clásicos, and that's exactly what I told him. Like dude, what you mean to this team is amazing. So I think he has to be up there as well. So I say Juninho and Pepe Rivas are right there for my top.
Okay, let's go midfielders.
Midfielders, I'd have to go. It'd be. Well, can we put Gaetan in the midfield?
Well, yeah, I'm gonna eventually, when you give me your players for each line, I'm gonna get you to give me your starting 11, like all time, either favorite or historic for you.
All right. I'd put at midfield. Lucas Ayala, I'd put at midfield. I put obviously. Who else would I put on there? Damn, I'm blanking on some names right now, but Carioca I'd put up there for sure. On the right side, I'd put probably I'd say Aquino as well. On the left side, Eduardo Regis was up there for me as well. That number 5, he was really good.
Yeah, I remember him growing up. A lot of back and forth. Attackers, best favorite attackers.
For attackers, I'd say Mumo Peralta. I put Mumo Peralta up there as well. Some of the unsung heroes. Fernando Acuña, just for to what he meant to the team. Obviously, because we could say Gaitan, we could say Guignac, we could say all these names, but some of these others are very, very good delanteros. So
Okay.
I'd say that.
Cool. So now give me your either historic slash all time 11 in your Jorge Moreno's world of Tigres.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put Daoud. I'm gonna give some Daoud some love on there as well. Daoud has to give a shout out within the podcast. Who else? We'll put Ivan Hurtado out there. Out next to Hugo Ayala. I'll have Hugo Ayala. On the right side, I'd go with. Give me some names on the right side.
You got Chaca, you got Piloto Jimenez, you got Mario Ruiz, you got Saavedra.
We'll go with Israel Jimenez. We'll go with Jimenez.
Piloto, okay.
Sí, Pilotillo. And then on the left side, I'd say, who would I go with? Torres Nilo.
Yeah.
Torres Nilo.
Okay, and then your midfielder. So you got your four, and your goalkeeper, and then you got midfield. You're going four in the back.
I'll go four in the back. So I'll go, like I said, I'd say Lucas Ayala would be another one. I'm trying to think of some other names that I haven't thought of. I'm trying to go random here. Something different. Who else would I go with? Damn, man, my 11 is horrible. I'm sorry, man. I apologize.
I mean, it's you've already said who the big dogs are, and we can that this makes it cool because it's like a lot of people get caught up in the best players, but you also had favorite moments of different players that weren't necessarily the best players. So to me, Lucas Ayala wouldn't make my starting all-time 11, right? But ultimately, he was really good because he was underrated, but he was just on very bad teams for Tigres. And so, even with the guy that you mentioned, Eduardo Regis, he was flying on the left side when he was playing either left back or he was playing a little higher up. He played on that 2003 championship run. So that's what makes it, to me, the best part of putting together all-time 11s, because everybody just, relives either their kid or, their way of seeing the game differently.
Yeah, man. So I owe you a starting 11 to Tigres, but overall.
When the pod comes out, send it, quote tweet it, and then that way you have some time to think about it.
Gotcha.
Okay, let's see. What has been maybe your favorite goal that you've either watched live or on TV for Tigres?
I'd say there's a few. El Clásico 75, where Tigres beat Real 6-2. That I was at that game. That first goal that the Tigres had was one of the goals that I most passionately screamed for. And then the last one, la final contra Chivas, el de Guido Pizarro. That one was crazy too, because I was at that final. I was at the final in 2017, and I tried to do everything as opposite I did in 2017 and 2019. And at halftime, I still felt the same 2-0 against me. And I felt the Estadio Akron. I had flashbacks of 2017 just falling on me. And then that team just came back and the way they did it. So I put Cordoba, I guess, in my historic 11, because Cordoba to me gave us that championship, and I still have to buy that jersey and put the 17 in the back because that man deserves that jersey. He brought us the championship.
That whole run was incredible.
It was Cordoba. Cordoba was MVP. So that's those two goals were some of the goals that I could tell you que sí grité así con el alma, se podría decir.
Okay, so you've watched the 6 championships, that we've lived, right, with the age that we've lived, from 2011 to the most recent one. What has been your favorite championship that we've obtained?
You mind if I show you?
Yeah.
This one right here. This is the ticket and the little book that they give you from the one against Santos 2011.
Dang, that's awesome.
That one has to be just overall the best one, because it was the first one. It was the first one into that run of championships, and you finally breaking that 29-year drought without winning a championship. That Sunday was probably one of the best Sundays in my life, if I could say it that way.
And I want to piggyback off that. It's also like the first championship. We growing up, we're the same age, you and I, and we're growing up. We see the failures with the Pachuca runs or the games, the championship runs against Pachuca. We see the bad era of Tigres, fighting relegation, and then we see it pick up with like Tuca coming back into play. And you're growing up, and that 2011 championship is just right around the time where like you're still like young enough to like feel it, like if you're still a teenager and like closer to your kid side. And so like all that emotion was just put into that championship. And then you obviously get into more championships where you start living it as an adult, and you obviously live sports differently. You can still have the same passion and intensity to watch sports and whatnot, but I feel like that 2011 championship, especially for you and I who are the same age, for me, it relates more to our kid version of like celebrating the championship because we were still young enough.
Yeah, man, for sure. I definitely agree. I was 2011, so I was 20 at the time.
Yeah.
During that championship, I remember just that those goals, screaming those goals, and then once that final whistle blew, I was just in tears. I couldn't. Everything that was in my past just came to me that day, and the amount of times we had lost, and those heartbreaks. So that was very special moment. That Saturday night was just overall a great night in Ciudad de Monterrey.
Yeah, La Macro.
It was it was crazy. I ended up because it was just me, and my two cousins that went to that final about my age, about our age, and I lost them. And I didn't have a phone. But at the end of the night, we ended up seeing each other within La Macro. So it was a pretty cool moment.
Great, good to hear. Bringing it back to Chicago, fast forwarding where we're at now. Paunovic. Paunovic was the head coach of Chicago for a couple seasons there, and now being at Tigres. What are your thoughts on him being the head coach?
Such a wild ride with Paunovic. I remember that's when I also started working as an auto engineer here in the city of Chicago. So I was covering that Chicago Fire team when he was here in the city, and he had that team, the best team in MLS. Schweinsteiger was still there, and they had a really good base with Dex McCarthy. It was a very explosive team going into halfway point of the MLS regular season, and then they had the All-Star game here in Chicago against Real Madrid, and I believe it was 3 players from the Chicago Fire that made it to the All-Star game, and he didn't take his forward. So from what I remember, that summer, that locker room just broke, and that rest of the season, they weren't as good, they weren't as effective. First round of the playoffs, they got bounced by New York, and to what I remember, he lost that locker room. He really did lose that locker room. Then Chivas happens, and I think he did a really good job with what he had. I think he made that team listen to him and really buy into what he was selling them, and that's great. I think he does that really well. I think he's a very smart coach, so I give him major props. And then during that last final, it was crazy enough. During the last final against Chivas, on my trip back to Chicago, he was on the same flight with me back to Chicago, Paunovic. Once we landed, he was taking pictures with Chivas fans. So that was a pretty cool full circle moment with Paunovic. And now for him to be the head coach of my favorite team is Tigres in general. It's pretty crazy how that moment went. And I've liked it so far. I think he's showing you that he's a very smart coach. I think he's making subs at the right moments. And I'm liking what I'm seeing from Paunovic. So I hope that growth from losing a locker room to being able to handle these stars transitions, because to me that's the most thing that I wonder about Paunovic.
Yeah, I mean, going into that locker room and not only handling the stars, bro, also the aging aspect, right? Like these players are, we hate to at times admit it, but they're on their way out in terms of their age, and we want to cherish those moments. And so this transition is going to be really interesting to see if he makes it through, right? Like if he gets the immediate success, more specifically, obviously through the Leagues Cup run that they're on, or going back to Liga MX and winning the title there, and seeing if it transitions to a longer run where he can truly be here for a while and transition these players out, and then also bring in new players to continue that growth that we've had on the pitch and as a club.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. And obviously, the fan base is behind them, which is the best part. I think that's number one. And as long as the results are there, as long as it's a competitive team, I think everything should be okay with this team. I think this they should win this Leagues Cup. There's no reason why they shouldn't win this Leagues Cup, and then go back and be competitive in Liga MX. I'm not saying win a championship. Obviously, that's the next goal, but the goal right now should be to win this Leagues Cup.
Yeah, and so I want to kind of finish off the conversation there. What are your thoughts on this fusion and collaboration of both leagues? And obviously, you state that Tigres should go all for it and win it, and I'm on the same page with you on in regards to that. What does that mean to you? Obviously, growing up sports wise here in the States, and I know that you've been able to go back and forth and visit El Volcan, but what do you think? The biggest thing for Leagues Cup, that collaboration has been, and then where do you see it, moving forward?
I think it's a two answer question. I think it's been good for the local fans. It's been good for all of us. It's been good for this team to finally come around these local these cities in the U.S. If this is the route, and it seems like this is the route that the tournaments that these are what they're gonna play. I would like to see it for these Mexican team, for the MLS teams to go to Mexico, actually make it a tournament. And in regards to it, I think it's not positive in the sense of growth for soccer in regards to what La Libertadores used to bring to you. But I guess in a way, I think it's beneficial for us as fans in the U.S. But and I guess in the long run, it might not at this point. I don't think it will affect Tigres as a in a soccer way, but other teams for sure. I think it will hurt other teams within both leagues in Liga MX and MLS with this, unfortunately, with this Leagues Cup.
Yeah, I feel like on paper it's made for the powerhouses of each league.
It's
You
true.
know,
I agree. I agree
Yeah,
100%.
because depth chart obviously comes into play, brand, and just how much spending money you obviously have. So I think for us, we have to win it. For the continued growth and to take advantage of that opportunity to we're playing Pachuca in Austin, soon.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you're gonna play more MLS teams. You might have to go to Miami, so bringing the brand there. You might have to go to NYC, bring the brand there. Might have to go to Columbus. Might have to go Cincinnati, St. Louis, and just having that presence and the local fans of the MLS to be associated with a team, and then obviously take advantage of the power of the stars that you have like Nahuel, Gignac. People know Carioca, people know Pizarro, and everybody else that's on the team that they either associate with a national team or just stardom in general. I think it's just super beneficial and got to take advantage to win that.
Yeah, for sure. Let me ask you this. Tomorrow you have Austin. We expect another home game for this team tomorrow in Austin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just going to be difficult, man. I have this conversation in different ways with either my family members, people on the pod, and just friends in general that maybe they're not as close to the team, but just are soccer fans. We had the first game in Houston. There was about 12,000 people there, and then 45,000 people at the Miami game. It's just difficult because you talk about going back to our earlier points of the conversation about the regio culture and how the city shuts down for the teams. Here, the president work takes over, right? Like we have work the next day, like the economical aspect of thinking oh, like I've already gone to the Miami game and I took the family, and so that was our outing. And then obviously you spend money on drinks, food, yada yada, parking. And so I feel like reflecting now, I've been lucky enough to where I've gone to the two games, and I'm going to the Austin game. Is yeah, it's great, but for the fan who wants to see them and wants to take their family or already took their family, it can be a lot. So I think having, obviously it's a good thing to have the team in a base where there's a lot of fans of us.
Yeah.
But it's also it can be it could work against you because you might not have the attendance. So there's about 22,000, 23,000 people that fit into that stadium in Austin. I would say at least half, if not a little bit half, should be there because you obviously have the San Antonio area, you have the Austin area, you're going to have people that travel from Houston and obviously from Monterrey as well. but it's during the week, right? It's a Thursday game. You still have people that have to go work the next day, and so I think that's where they have to figure out a way to maybe accommodate, by stretching out the calendar of games to maybe accommodate them on the weekends so they can get even more people in the stands. Because ultimately, it's a business tournament, right? Like they're definitely getting the fan bases of all the Liga MX teams to attend and like build a rivalry, which is cool. But ultimately, like here the culture of the United States is like you don't really shut yourself out of like what you have in routine, right? Like even if you're a crazy, in your case, the Cubbies, or down here there's the Astros, you're not going to stop going to work because there's a big game. Maybe the World Series, but a regular game that doesn't really have that type of hype and hasn't built up to that hype can get difficult. So it's going to be interesting. I'm hoping at least half the attendance of the stadium, but we'll see.
Yeah, man. It's crazy how this tournament is really coming up really quick, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing to be able to get this tournament in, and obviously hopefully hope for the best for the team, and hopefully they raise the cup.
Absolutely. Well, my friend, it's been a pleasure having you on. We could do this for hours. There's so much to talk about.
Sure.
I've enjoyed the conversation. Really, good talking points, and driving it in a way that you've shared some of the things that were locked in the back of my head that haven't gotten a chance to speak about even in past recording of the pod. So I appreciate your time. I know it's late night for the both of us, but thank you so much for coming on, and I'm looking forward to continuing to engage, in the future.
For sure, man. I appreciate the time, appreciate the opportunity, and I think you're doing a great job of expanding the brand, the passion into the English, into our day-to-day conversations, and I think that's you're doing a great job, and I appreciate everything that you're doing for the Tigres community.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure, like I said. So we'll stay in touch, and we'll take care, my friend.
For sure.